Howdy, and welcome back to another episode of World Bigfoot Radio.
Or is it a hoax? Well, one East Texas woman has dedicated the past 5 years to studying DNA of the species. Members of the Sasquatch Genome Project recently released new, higher quality, never before seen footage of Bigfoot. Dr. Melba Ketchum tells East Texas News 9's Leah Hughes that Bigfoot is real, and her research proves it. It's new at 10.
It took the Sasquatch Genome Project 5 years and nearly $500,000 to do it, but this group of scientists believe they have proven the existence of Bigfoot.
Neither evidence will stand alone under the scrutiny we're getting. Well, mine would, but it's not interesting to viewers because it's DNA.
The group recently released this new video they captured of the elusive creature. Lead investigator Dr. Melba Ketchum says she studied a DNA sample of the specimen you see right here in the video, shot by team member Adrian Erickson.
We tested, among other things, the red hair gene. And when we sequenced the red hair gene in this individual, she's red, and she had human sequence at that particular gene, and it has red hair. The physical attributes of the specimen in his video exactly matches what we tested, and nobody could have predicted that. In other words, her DNA matches her video, which is so wonderful.
Ketchum says she has no doubt that what she is researching is some kind of human hybrid.
They're more whatever they are with a little bit of human.
But you won't catch Ketchum calling them Bigfoot.
They're humans. You're a type of human, you don't want to kill them. That's wrong. We want them protected. They don't need habitat. They live fine like they do.
And when asked why there weren't any remains or bodies to study,
they are able to hide from us. That's why there's not bodies. They live in an environment. They have the cunning of animals, and they have the intelligence of human and more.
Ketchum says she was once a skeptic, but all that changed because she has seen Bigfoot with her own 2 eyes.
So they took me up to North Texas, and I was able to actually I saw 5 that day, which just blew my mind.
You were 100% certain you saw what you
saw. Oh, yeah, there's no doubt in my mind.
Ketchum says she hopes the new video, along with her research, will result in some recognition from the scientific community. Leah Hughes, East Texas News.
Well, Dr. Ketchum says there have been numerous Bigfoot sightings right here.
We are back again with the amazing Dr. Ketchum and continuing on with our conversation about Sasquatch DNA and the ongoing cryptid DNA study. And we left off on the subject of government suppression. So welcome back again to the show, Dr. Melba Ketchum.
Thank you. Yeah, the government doesn't want this out. That's been quite obvious with the suppression of public paper, the threatening of people that have worked with me, and them having an agent out by our lab, among other things, when we were doing the work. So, with all that said, yes, it's a major problem. I think they also have trolls out there that, well, I know they do, that not only say untrue things about me, but they just generally cause a lot of problems, and they put stuff out that's just not true to make me look bad, and scream contamination and all this, that, and the other. And I've had death threats and everything else, so they're probably behind some of that at least. Of course, there are the legitimate haters. They want to be, quote, the first one out there. I mean, I wasn't even the first one out there. I'm just the first one to go public with it. So I can't say that I'm the pioneer of all this. I probably have the most up-to-date data because we used all the, most modern techniques at the time. And those haven't changed that much in the last 10 years, but they've gotten a lot less expensive, thank goodness. But
that's a big point right there when you want to go ahead and continue doing an ongoing study. At the time that you did this original study, it was ghastly expensive, and it's gotten considerably cheaper. It's still expensive, but it's gotten considerably cheaper to do it now. So that's going to, enable you to get a lot more bang for the buck that you can actually get anything done.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've got all kinds of samples. We've got, we're doing a few more Bigfoot samples from hair. We're doing, we have 2 really good viable dogman samples that are already partially completed. We lack the whole genome on a second sample. And assuming it lines up with the first one, we're home free on that. Then we have a couple of giant samples that came from the Lovelock Cave area. And then we received them from the museum out there. And we have some elongated skulls. And we also have the famous Russian samples, Zayna and Quit. They're at the bottom of the list, though, because there's already been some work done on them. I would like to validate that work, but I want to get the unknowns done first.
Right. So what have you got from the Lovelock Cave Giants, the Seneca is what we're talking about? Have you got bones or what kind of samples have you got from them?
We have teeth from 2 of the mandibles.
Nice.
So we have 2 samples from them. We have a great huge tooth also that it's humanoid, but we don't know what it's from, but it's giant. And that one we just found in the desert by an individual. And then we have a humerus, a arm bone.
Was the big tooth found anywhere near the Superstition Mountains by chance?
I really don't know exactly where it was found, but it was found, and so it's going to be ready to go. So we've already started. We haven't started any testing yet. We're waiting till the funding of the project is where it's going to be. We actually have met our goal, thank the Lord. We are doing really well with getting research money, but the more we get, the more we can test. We've achieved what we do to get the minimal done. And anything above that's going to let us do even more studies, which is great because we're looking for more cryptid samples. I would like to have, actually my bucket list has mermaids on it because I do believe they exist. They're a hybrid like anything else. I also would love to have, a goat man sample or a satyr or whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
I would love, and hair is always, hair and teeth are the testing, platforms we really like because they can be washed to get any contaminants out. So, those are the types of samples that we really like. Although if it's something really interesting, we'll consider doing other types of sample, blood or saliva or whatever. But
I know you got one sample in the original study that was a toenail. That's a little bit out of the ordinary. Yeah,
but it was very sample. Actually, I've talked about revisiting that as part of this. And the more money we raise, the more of these types of things we can do. And, because it did meet all the criteria to be a Sasquatch sample. It was in the study, and it ran well. So,
that is very cool.
Yeah, it is. We've had all kinds of samples, and but I like the hair. But the hair has to have roots on it. We visited this in part 1, where Sasquatch hair shafts don't give DNA, and that is very unique because mammalian species give mitochondrial DNA from their hair shafts, and especially big viable hair shafts like these things. These are like horse mane hair. It's coarse.
Yeah.
And it should have gobs of DNA in it, and it has none when you extract it. And like I said, we spent 3 months, trying to figure out why we weren't getting DNA from these hair shafts. And finally just had to boil it down to putting them through a spectrophotometer to see if there was any DNA there at all and not just inhibitors. And it was no DNA. So that's unusual. And they have the medulla, they have everything. All the structure is there, like a normal mammals, but they don't yield any mitochondrial DNA out of those hair shafts.
Well, thanks for clearing that up because that oft-repeated thing keeps going around over and over again. Well, the reason you can't get DNA from the hair is because there's no medulla there. And what you're saying is that irrelevant, even if there's a medulla there, there's no DNA in their hair.
Exactly, in their hair shafts. Now, if it's got a root, yes. But if it's just the hair shaft itself or a shed hair, no, you can't get any DNA from it. And that's unique, period. And like I say, we spent 3 months troubleshooting before we came to that final conclusion. We were very careful about this. And so, it's real interesting. We have pictures of the hair in the study. And, you can clearly see the medulla in them. So there's no reason, there's no real reason for them not to have it other than they are just not like the rest of the animals on Earth. Or people or anything else for that matter. So
very peculiar. Did you get any samples sent to you that were specified to be from a skunk ape? Just curious.
We had some from the region that would have possibly, the one Erickson sample was from Alabama,
right?
Which could be a skunk ape.
Let me see about getting you a sample from an actual skunk ape collected so that you can test that, because apparently they're not the same thing. The Sasquatch don't consider them to be the same thing. They're close to them, but they're not the same thing according to them.
This is how I look at it. There are different races, just like with people. They're going to be similar. They are not the same thing.
Yep.
And they probably are a little more diverse than human races, but they're still basically the same thing, but there's going to be some genetic variation. So I just call them different races, for lack of a better term.
Well, that's part of the problem, because even within witnesses will tell you, the ones that are actually long-term habituators and dealing with the same group and the same individuals over and over and over again, and they see the new babies being born and they watch them getting bigger and stuff, and the amount of variation within a family group seems to be way larger than what you would get out of an equal human-sized group. Like, they got a lot of variation.
I can explain that real easy. They are hybrid.
Yeah.
And when you have hybrids and recombination occurs, you're going to have this wide range of variation, because, like, for instance, whenever the DNA, when the mating occurs, you might say inherit it more human from one parent and less from another. Or you're going to get, yet another amount of more unknown or something. It's not going to combine equally like it will in people, because we're a pure breed. Like, say, dogs. There's all kinds of dogs. They're still dogs, but there's all different kinds. And, but if it's a true breed, it'll generally breed true. But they're not hybridized with other things. It's like, now let's take a true hybrid, like, say, a donkey or a liger. If you have the mother to be the donkey and the stallion the sire, the creature is going to look more like a donkey, whereas a mule looks more like a horse. But even at that, you get this different recombination, that some mules look more donkey-like and others look more horse-like. The same with your hennies or your female donkey bred to a stallion. You're going to see some hennies look a little more horse and some hennies look a little more donkey, because it's an unequal combination. Whenever the offspring is produced, that they may predominantly get more genes from a parent that, it just doesn't work that way with a hybrid. A hybrid is completely different, and they can give a lot more phenotypes or physical appearances than somebody that's not a hybrid.
So you can have two parents producing offspring, and all the offspring are going to look a lot different than each other.
Yeah, they can look a lot different. And like I say, it's just a matter, you've got hybridized parents. And so they're going to have, let's just make it real simple. For argument's sake, say they're human and ape. I mean, that's not what they actually are, but just so to make it simple. You've got human and ape. Well, whenever you get the gamete, which would be your sperm or your ovum, you're going to get half of that complement. And that half of the complement is not going to run true. It's not going to be like all human or all ape or whatever. It's going to be a combination of the two. So one gamete or one ovum or sperm might have more human-like characteristics, whereas the other one may have more ape-like characteristics. Mm-hmm. And then you have the other side where the other parent is going to have the same thing going on. So feasibly, you can run the gamut but all the way between human and ape if they were half human and half ape. They're not, but just for our sake, any hybrid, you're going to have hybrids that look more one or the other and anywhere in between. So it's going to be a huge variety of individualization with that. I hope that's clear.
Yep, it's interesting and makes sense to me. So you're looking for samples of other things besides Sasquatch, and we have identified a couple of the extremely dangerous cryptids on this continent that aren't Sasquatch. And we'll see if maybe we can get you some samples from them to take a look at, too. One of them is the Gugwe, which I think is related to Dinopithecus, but we need sample to test that because it sure looks like them. And then the Janoskwa, which is some sort of Bigfoot hybrid with something else, which we suspect is, again, back breeding with giants or whatever. So that's another one.
I want some real double-rowed teeth giant samples like the Kandahar giant.
Yeah.
I want some DNA from that. I don't know how I'll get one, but overseas they're not as guarded about it as they are here in the States. I'm hoping I can come up with
I'd start pestering people in South America because they dig this stuff up pretty regularly, and they don't seem to have the deep state breathing down their neck down there as much.
If somebody's got connections down there, that would be great because I don't have that many, but I would love to have, the different races of giants represented. We've got two, but they're going to be the same race. I would love to have the...
What are they, the Anakim, the conehead guys?
Oh, I've got those too, but that's different. Okay. They're not really giants. There are some giant ones, but what I've got is regular people-sized ones. No, I'm talking about like the Lovelock Cave giants. I've got two of those kind of samples, but I would like to have something like the Kandahar giant, bigger than these.
I know somebody else that was in country there that had another sighting of those things, and they were flying in a helicopter across a valley in the mountains. And apparently the noise from the helicopters kicked up three of them. And they took off running across the valley at right angles away from the path of the helicopters. But everybody in the helicopters could look down and see these red-haired giants on the ground running, which they were guesstimating were doing between 60 and 75 miles an hour, by the way. I'm
sure. Look at the foot. They can run, 45 and above themselves.
Yep.
They've not been known to chase people in cars.
Yep. I had two different witnesses on my show that have been chasing their cars, and both of them said they had to get up above 50 miles an hour to pull away from them. Until then, they were hanging right with them.
I had a local here that was on a four-wheeler, and he kept up with them at 45 miles an hour, and he just ran out of woods.
Yeah. But same thing here. As soon as they topped over 50, then it couldn't hang with them anymore. Well, one of them actually helped them because he tried to grab the back of the car, and all he did was give it more traction, so that it really got away from him faster.
Yeah. So, these things can do things that we wouldn't expect they'd be able to do, but they're able to do it. So, which is always interesting. We, touched on that earlier. But, back to the DNA, it's unique. It's not anything that's been seen before. And, this is what's interesting about it. And the fact that they're part human, that they're a hybrid, that's interesting too. I had a whistleblower come forth that I'll release some of that information along with the new study. And they had done some DNA, and it corroborated mine. And they had like 13 bodies in a live capture. And it was very interesting. I've got data that's been given to me from them before they died. And so, you know, I'm not the first. I'm not going to claim first. I'll gladly share it with this other scientist, you know, in memoriam. But it was very interesting. All of the reason that he said they never came out with it was they kept fighting over whether it was homo or not, if it was true homo. And because they tried to make it fit an evolutionary model, and a hybrid doesn't fit an evolutionary model.
Right.
And that's where the big debate came in. So they never came out with it, but I think also the government suppressed that too, because it was a secret study. And but there's no way it wasn't real, because he had data that I didn't have, and I had data he didn't have, and between the two of us, it was really interesting. So, and I hate he's gone. He was a wonderful guy. But and I didn't know him. He looked me up. So
the taxonomic designation in his study delineates a reference to a South American reptile, which you would think has nothing to do with them, except for one interesting thing that it can do, which is regenerate lost body parts.
Yes, and that is something interesting that is talked about in this alleged Miller document, how the decedents were regenerating so fast you didn't think they were dead. So that was, you know, kind of corroborated by that alleged scientist. And I do find that very, and about that and other things will come out with the science. I've got all kinds of different things that will be in this. That's why we're not going to try to publish this. We're going to probably put it in the form of a documentary or a informal paper, because the government's not going to let us publish.
No.
Unless I put it out with the same journal as I did that we bought, that we had to buy to get that. And if I do that, you know, it's going to be the same old, oh, well, you know, she self-published. We didn't self-publish, but this would be self-published. Therefore, I don't want to do it that way. I'll just bring it out and let everybody see it when it's done.
Well, as a scientist famously said one time, our great spirits have always met violent opposition from mediocre minds. Albert Einstein. And yeah, he's absolutely right. Anybody that comes along that breaks their little paradigm and shatters their wall of glass and knocks down their house of cards is not somebody that they embrace and hug and say, welcome, thanks for ruining our world. Now we have to rewrite all our history books. No, that isn't the way you're greeted. So actually, I agree with you. I think that's a better way to put it out, go directly to the people. Because look at people like John Bindernagel and how much time he spent and all the study he did. And he wrote books and he tried to get his, comrades in the scientific community to take a look at it and, actually take a look at it. And they wouldn't. So why waste your time?
Yeah, exactly. I was at the top of my game. And I lost all of my scientific friends pretty much because none of them, either they got threatened by the government or they got threatened by their bosses, or they just were so closed-minded that they didn't want to give it a chance. So, I got ostracized, basically. Now, oddly enough, I had a lot of scientists come forth and contact me and say, man, you did a great paper. This is a great paper. And we believe it, but don't use our name. We don't want to get in the trouble you're in. Don't use our name, but we support you.
We support you secretly from behind the scenes where it's not helping. Yeah, thanks, guys.
I know we've had a lot of that. And, and our results have been corroborated. So it's not like we're just out there as a lone gun. Some people don't even know they've corroborated them, and they have. So it's really interesting. And all of that's going to come out. I want to finish this thing up. There will be years and years of study. The more money we raise, the more work we can do and the more cryptids we can do. We've got the minimal raised to do, the minimal on all things now. But I would really like to see where we can maybe do some individual genes and maybe some different cryptids if we can get the samples. Like I said earlier, a mermaid's on my bucket list. And, there's other things too, like goat men and other things. We we would love to have different cryptid DNA. And because my theory, once again, is that they're all going to have human mothers. I believe that. And I want to prove it. I've already gotten human DNA from the dogman mitochondrial samples, both of them. So I know that they have human mothers.
Well, Bigfoot, just on the face of it, you can look at the creature and you can go, well, I can see how something like that could arise naturally. But Dogman, no. That is not a natural creature. It's fairly obvious just from looking at it.
Sasquatch isn't either. And that's
the point that I'm trying to make, though. On a casual glance, it looks like Bigfoot could be. They're not either. So that really brings into question how many of these cryptids are real and are actually out there, and do they all have the same genesis point, the same mad scientist way back in prehistory playing with his GMO Tinker Toy set?
Well, that's what we're hoping to find out, among other things, because once we get the mito, we can sort of date it. And just like we did with the Sasquatch samples, and they're human especially. And the same sort of with if there's any human in the Y chromosome, which it wasn't with the Sasquatch. They were unique. So their progenitor was not male human at all, not even close. It wasn't anything that has been sequenced before. There's a lot of totally unknown in it. And that's why we're going to revisit even the Sasquatch samples a little bit, because I want to use a different lab and see if we still get the same thing we did with those first 3 genomes. And I bet we will.
Definitely a good idea. Did you get any samples from Eastern Europe by chance? Because there's an interesting thing over there where, in North America, they talk about some of the natives occasionally would have the women kidnapped by the Sasquatch and they would never come back again. Or in a couple of cases, they came back and, they gave birth to weird twisted things that didn't live very long, fortunately, and that sort of thing. So basically pointing in the direction of they're still mating with human women occasionally. If you go over to Eastern Europe, apparently it's flipped on its head. The Orthodox Church over there had to release an incantation to protect the men from being abducted by female Bigfoot. And apparently this is enough of an issue that the church actually made an incantation against it that they passed around. When Rich Soul was on my show, he actually had dug the whole thing up and read it. But it's specifically for, hey, I'm a good Christian man. Go back to your cave in the forest and be a good Sasquatch. Don't take me with you. I'm not interested in being your husband. And okay, what the hell is that all about? And if there was something like that actually going on, maybe you would see examples of there being male human DNA in the sample.
Rare, let's put it that way. I think the majority of the breeding population, is probably thousands of years old. Mm-hmm. But there are some recent ones. But when you compare,
keeping in mind, they made this incantation just a few hundred years ago, so that wasn't thousands of years ago. It was enough of a problem for the church to do something about it.
Right. Okay, let me put this in perspective, though. There are thousands and thousands and thousands of Bigfoot creatures all over the world by different names. I mean, there are I would say well over 1 million if you go worldwide. And they're not uncommon. I mean, the clan I deal with, it's got 10 in it that I've seen at one time. Mm. So that's not counting babies. So, there's a lot of them. And if they abduct 20 or 30 men, that's a negligible sample. So what I'm saying is the chances, the likelihood of getting a human male sample is highly unlikely, just by the numbers. But it does happen. It's happened in North America.
It's actually happened even more recently in Mongolia in the 1960s. There was a teacher that was kidnapped by 2 Almas, apparently female, and after having them in their cave for 3 or 4 days, they got bored of them and let them escape.
Oh, there you go. Well, like I say, there's several stories, here in North America. And, your co-host, Robin McCrae, when she's on with you, she knows of one too. So, it happens. It's just happens, and when you look at sheer numbers and how hard it is to get the sample, the chances of actually getting one are pretty rare, but I'm sure they exist. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I just kind of found that interesting because in North America, you get all the old stories about the Sasquatch stealing the women. And then you go over to Eastern Europe and it's all like, no, the female Sasquatch are trying to kidnap the guys. What the hell, you know?
Yeah, well, they do that. I mean, it's a two-way street.
Apparently, those Eastern European guys are really cute because the female Sasquatch like them. So look out if you live over there, guys.
Well, I guess somebody who's looking for a mate can always go over there. But
anyway. or perhaps less flatteringly, you guys look a lot like male Sasquatch, and they can't tell the difference. You guys can decide which one it is.
Well, regardless of it, it could work both ways. I will say this, that we have reason to believe that over the millennia, they have genetically I know genetically they've bred out a lot of the human on the nuclear side. We're the weaker species. Right. And, genetically speaking, it's survival of the fittest. So we're hairless. We're not as strong. We're not as tall. We're not as, robust as they are. So those that have more human in them are going to be the ones that die off first because
natural
they can't.
Selection. Yep.
So it's kind of
compete with the big ones.
It's kind of like us with Neanderthal and Denisovan. It's only a very small percentage because they were not like us, and we basically were the survivors of the different hominids from ancient times. And so it's kind of the same with them with their genetics. They don't have near as much human in the nuclear DNA as you would think, but I'm quite sure that that's due to natural selection and die-off due to our weaker genetics. And with that has also made it more difficult for them to mate with us because they are more different than they were from us. Because when they started, obviously, they were half human and half progenitor. And, first generation. And then the next generation, when they started breeding together, say they had some hairless ones born and they froze in the winter. Mm-hmm. So down through the millennia, they have become more their own species of hybrid with less traits of the hybrid. That's why you have less of them that really look as human as we are. You're going to find the occasional one that does, though. There's going to be an occasional one that looks very, very human.
Yeah. But again, this would explain why they'll lean over time more and more heavily toward the progenitor male branch of the genome, because the natural selection favors them to be like that. If they're more like us, they tend to die. So
exactly. So that's what I'm saying, and we did find that with the final analysis of the whole genome was that we didn't have as much human in them on the nuclear side as we expected. But yet that mitochondrial DNA is incontrovertible. It's there. So they definitely did come from humans on the mother's side.
Now, that brings me to another question that somebody's going to ask in the chat, so I might as well just go ahead and bring it up right now. Inbreeding, they aren't the only things that hybridize with humans. We've got a good percentage of people from Europe that still carry Neanderthal DNA around with them. Is there any evidence that the Sasquatch have inbred with the Denisovans or the Neanderthal?
No, they predated them. They were gone by the time Sasquatch came along.
Okay.
And we did not find any Neanderthal or Denisovan in our samples. Now, that's not to say that statistically there isn't some, because there could have been, the human mother could have had some in her that passed down, but it's so little that it didn't show up.
Right. So if they hybridized with the human mother that had like 3% Neanderthal DNA, you wouldn't expect it to carry down into the children anyway.
Right. And it will in people, but it wasn't 3% or anything. There was nothing that we could tie it to. We even individually ran the red hair gene, the human red hair gene. Mm-hmm. There's one point mutation that is totally Neanderthal red hair. They did not have that. The samples that we did on that individual test for the red hair gene. They had the human red hair gene, but they didn't have the Neanderthal one.
So for
again,
folks that think that they might be some kind of a hybrid of us and Neanderthal or us and Denisovans, no, wrong. They're not.
no way. Not at all.
Good to know.
Because I thought they were leftover Neanderthals at first. I really did. That was my first theory.
So did the Russians. They worked on that basis for a long, long time.
Right. And but it turns out that is just not the case. So, with that said, I've just negated everything about Denisovans or Neanderthals to them because there just wasn't any proof that any of it was there. And if it were, it was so little it didn't show up. And if it were, it came from the human side.
Mm.
So,
well,
no.
that's interesting. Look here. We are narrowing it down. If you can't tell exactly what something is, you can eliminate what it isn't. And we're doing that right now. We're eliminating what it isn't. It isn't Denisovan. It isn't Neanderthal. Thank you for making that very abundantly clear. You guys who think it's a Neanderthal, forget it. It's not.
Yeah, it's definitely not. And I know what they are. It'll come out as far as their genetic makeup. Not what people are going to really expect.
So are they? Does it seem like they're an amalgam? Like some of their DNA is just chunks from other things put together?
Yes, they're genetically engineered, regardless of how it was done or who did it. They definitely are genetically engineered. They definitely couldn't have occurred naturally. That's for sure.
Well, I'll
they
tell
are
you,
not a creature.
Yeah, just from observing them and seeing their behavior and stuff, it always made me wonder if there was like some gibbon DNA in them, because man, they got a lot of similarities with those guys too.
Well, you can look at the orang pendek, which is an interesting creature because it has basically an 8 foot. The big toe sticks out to the side like your ape.
Right.
Yet they have the attributes of a Sasquatch in that they do things and aren't easy to find. And actually, Dr. Tom Gilbert from Copenhagen, and on my YouTube channel, I have a little short clip of this. He said he did an orang pendek hair, and it turned out human mitochondrial DNA, just like that. And the people where it was taken, they don't have red-haired people there. And it was bright red hair. And plus, it was apparently a good chain of custody. But he got the same treatment I did. They said, oh, it must be contaminated.
Right.
No, I know him. He is a consummate scientist. There would be no contamination. So it supported my findings with the orang pendek.
Right. Now, the orang pendek, of course, everything over there is orang something, which just means forest person, orangutan, orang pendek. Orang Moal, there's a whole bunch of them. Anyway, Orang pendek is the little short guy for everybody out there that doesn't know. He ain't very tall. And it's interesting that he has the ape-like foot with a divergent hallux on it. And yet, from what I understand, all reports and everything seem to indicate he's a biped.
Yes, he is. Yeah, they are. And that's why I say they're basically another race of something similar to a Bigfoot. And then the DNA showed a human mitochondrial DNA, just like my study did, which was really interesting. Not surprising to me, but interesting. So, you have these creatures all over the world, regardless of whatever moniker they put on them, that they have very similar capabilities. They have very similar, they're bipedal, and, all of that is supports that they're all connected. They're all somewhat the same creature. They are not just a standard ape or anything. They're different, and so regardless of what you call it, they're all going to be similar.
Well, absolutely. And I mean, you'd expect there'd be regional variations. There's one group living in an area for a long time. They're going to, adjust to that area and may look a little bit different than the ones a few hundred miles away, but it's still pretty much the same thing. And what always surprised me is just the observation from the field researchers of like some of the things they do here in North America. And then you talk to somebody in Australia that's looking at the Yowies going, yeah, they do all that here too.
Yeah, and that's the way it is worldwide, regardless of what flavor they are.
Mm-hmm.
You got skunk ape, you got, and there's some stuff I'll bring out about the different variants and different morphology of even North American Sasquatch. That's something I haven't released yet. So there's a lot of very interesting little tidbits out there about these things and their interactions with people or lack thereof. Some are more gentle than others. There's just all different things to be learned. And I've been so blessed to have, so many people come forward as well as, my own experiences to learn about this on top of the genetics. And it all fits. It all is very similar in a lot of ways. And I find that fascinating. So.
Definitely one of the ways you can tell when you're on the right track, when all the puzzle pieces you've got all start fitting together and making a picture, and there aren't any ones left lying around upside down or anything. You can be pretty sure you're on the right track at that point.
Absolutely. And that's what we've got. And I'll tell you something, even the non-genetic field research and other things that I have access to or have done myself, I never take it on one person's word or even my own word. I have to have it verified through an independent source before I consider it part of the data. There's still the science there. I don't, go running out in the woods with cameras. That's no. But if something happens that's an interesting finding of some sorts, regardless of what it is, it needs to be independently verified before I'll even consider it.
Totally agree with you. And, somebody's got to be out in the field filming them. I'm one of those guys. Hi. But I might even be worse than you on that score, because I will personally see some weird little tidbit happen, and I want 3 or 4 different people to verify it independently to me before I even start thinking there's a pattern.
Well, let's just go basics here. Everybody knows they make stick structures.
Yep.
It's verified by more than one person, so it's pretty much you would consider it more or less a scientific fact that they make stick structures, because there's too many people that have witnessed them and there's no explanation for them other than the Sasquatch doing it.
Well, the usual argument there is that whoever saw a Bigfoot building a stick structure or tree structure, and my argument to that is, who have you seen building it besides a Bigfoot, and why do we keep finding Bigfoot tracks around tree and stick structures if they're not building them?
Well, I was just going basic there that, there's things that are kind of verifiable about them.
Yeah.
And you want to do that with science. That's why we did a blind study and double blind study in some cases with these samples.
Yeah.
But it's the same with every part of the research. For it to be real research, it needs to be corroborated like our DNA was. And it needs to be corroborated by people that are not connected. So, And I've been very adamant about that when people have told me things or I've experienced something.
Well, you bring up tree structures, and this is great because this is one of those things that's, hands-on, real physical thing. Something is making these tree structures. Is it Bigfoot? Is it somebody else? Whatever, who knows? So you got to investigate it. Now, the next question is, what do they mean? And they do mean something. So then you have to develop a theory on what does this one particular tree structure mean. You have to develop a method of testing if you're correct or not. You have to run a lot of tests and consider yourself wrong or right after a lot of them. And if you consider yourself right, then you start asking other field researchers, hey, have you ever seen this? Check this out and see if it works that way in your area. And a good example of this is like leaners on trees. We started noticing that they would leave leaners on. What are the leaners for? The leaners are trail markers. There's certain trail markers they make that are like secret trail markers. They'll snap a branch. Why'd they snap the branch? Well, because they're going through there. This is one of their regular travel routes. Is the branch completely off? No. Is it twisted? Yes. Which direction is it twisted? Is it twisted to the right? There's a secret trail to the right. is a twist to the left, there's a secret trail to the left. This is stuff that we've tested in the field, and it comes up every single time. Yeah, there's something over there. So that's how you start figuring this stuff out. And unless you're doing a lot of it and you've got other people elsewhere doing a lot of it in their research areas and comparing notes, you never figure it out.
I've had things like that happen. That one of the first things that happened when I was introduced to him is I had a pecan tree, and they were breaking the top of the branches out of the pecan tree, and it made me mad. And I was storming about that. And the day after I was storming about it, there was a little bone X at the foot of the tree. I mean, and it was not put there by an animal. There was no way. They were perfectly matched bones, perfectly sized. I have pictures. And it was right there under that tree, and they never broke another branch out of it. So, you know, and other people have stuff like that. And that's
Were they somehow unaware that was your tree? Because it sounds like you had to explain that to them.
It was my tree, and it was my pecan. I was like, breaking the top out of the tree. It's right in the front yard. It's making it ugly. And it's going to hurt my nut crop. So, you know, it was definitely, you know, it was definitely an interesting observation that I was not expecting the next morning.
But then they quit messing with the tree.
Absolutely. Never was it touched.
Yeah, I'd like to make the point on this note, since you just brought that up, and this comes up a lot. You know, if you're having issues with your local Sasquatch and they're like maybe doing something in your property you don't like or something, the first thing you can do is go outside, especially when you think they might be around, but just in case there's somebody watching, and just tell them out loud, hey, you guys quit doing this. I don't like it. Quit it.
Well, I was storming. I was mad. I mean, there was like 3 or 4 big branches out of the top of it.
Don't wreck my tree. It's yummy. Quit it.
So they moved to a bigger tree, and they would go up the back side of it, and they wore the bark off the back side of it, shooting into the tree. So I think, you know, they're watching is what it is. They watch.
Favorite observation tree.
Exactly. So, I mean, you know, it's been interesting. They did not come out to me until I did the study, started the study. And after I'd actually seen them somewhere else. But it's been quite the trip. And, you know, I've got lots of pictures, gifts they've left, all kinds of crazy things. But, you know, that's not science, so I don't usually talk about it. And but I'm not the only one that experiences this. So the point I'm making is it's been corroborated by others. Things like that happen.
Yep.
So,
that's the point I'm making, too. Some of these people that have been doing field research for 10, 20, 30, 40, longer, like me, and a few of my friends. We've seen so much of this stuff in the field. We've been talking to witnesses that have had weird things like this happening to them for like decades. And it gets to the point where they can start telling you a story and you go, and then this happened next. And they're like, how'd you know? Because I've heard this story 100 times.
You know? A lot of times.
Yeah. Or my favorite one is, I got Bigfoot messing around on my property, I think. I'm not sure, but there's like something slapping my house and it knocked my wood pile over. And I'm like, let's see, it's springtime right now. They're moving around. Do you have a drainage ditch or a little creek or something near your house? Yeah, there's one about. They're following the drainage ditch around and they're messing with your house because it's right next to it. Don't worry about it.
Oh, I tell you what, you know, and some of the things they've left me have been just unbelievable.
Yeah, some things they consider to be really cool and a gift are like not on our gift list.
There's been dead birds. There's been live crawfish that I've never seen on property before.
How the heck does a live crawfish get up on your porch? You know.
I'm sorry. Oh yeah, right in the front door. Right at the front door. No doubt.
Yeah.
And I had one thing that a big rock. I wasn't sure if it was rock or if it was plaster that had imprint of a fern in it. You know, looked like a fossil possibly, and I was going to, you know, chip on it and, you know, see what it was because they had brought it up and left it by the house. And I was talking to another person, a friend of mine was over, and I said, hey, this thing is, I can't tell if it's plastic or if it's actually kind of a fossil. I said, it's pretty neat though, isn't it? Well, the next morning I go out and it was broken in half to show that it was not rock. It was broken in half, plastic. I don't know where they got it. I don't know, but they left it. So,
yeah, some of the interesting things. My friend Joyce Gray was out walking around filming them randomly. And she had this one that used to show up pretty regularly. And one of the times she filmed him, she sees him over in this bush and she's getting ready to zoom in on him. And he sticks his tongue out at her and holds up his cell phone that he stole from somebody. Like, what the hell, dude? And then there's another guy over in Michigan who was walking around his research area, and he's filming just kind of, he's going out into this field, and on the edge of the field, there's, of course, the wood line, and ways up the wood line, there's something standing next to this tree, and it's too close to him. So he doesn't want to cause conflict, so he just kind of like brings the camera across and then he keeps going to get out of there. And when he goes back and looks at him, there's a Sasquatch standing there, and he's got somebody's game cam, and it's got the batteries ejected, and he's holding it up like it's a trophy or something, like he's proud of it. And it wasn't one of this guy's game cams. He has no idea where it came from. But he went back to check the spot, and sure enough, there was nothing standing there. There wasn't any Bigfoot or anything standing there. So
I've had a National Honor Society medal left in the seat of my truck. I don't know where but they did. And it wasn't mine, because mine were in my jewelry box inside. So it was somebody else's. And it wasn't shaped like any of mine, but it was a National Honor Society medal. They've left costume jewelry in the catfish. I mean, you name it, it's been weird, some of the things they've left. But, it just goes with the territory. Once they're around, they're around.
Yeah. My main camp out site up there in the Sapphire Mountains, they had started leaving weird things on the campsite, and I didn't realize what was going on. And one time we show up, and there's a pair of brand new Oakley sunglasses and really expensive motorcycle gloves, and they're just sitting down by the river. Like, who the hell would leave those there? And then the next time we show up, there's a brand new canteen, all shiny silver, beautiful. Who leaves this stuff around, So I got curious, and I asked Robin, where is this stuff coming from? She's like, oh, they think maybe you or your guys lost it when you were walking around in the woods, so they're bringing them back to the campsite in case you lost them. Then you can get them back. And I asked everybody, and they said, no, we didn't lose that. So I let her, tell them that, we didn't lose any of that stuff. They said, oh, good, we'll keep them then. I don't know what they're doing with Oakley sunglasses or a silver canteen. But the thing that occurred to me immediately is that there's other campsites in that valley. So where exactly are these objects coming from? We lost them somewhere else in the valley, like where? On somebody else's campsite?
Oh, boy. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy stuff. I mean, I had trouble with them turning the water on and leaving it on.
Oh, that could get expensive. It'd
get hot in the summer, and they'd turn on the water, and they'd leave it on, and I threw a fit. They hadn't done it since, but I threw a fit. I was raging about that. And one night, a juvenile opened my front door and twisted the doorknob so hard that it busted it. I had to take a chisel and everything else to get the thing out to replace it. It was so bent up. And that was something that a normal human really couldn't do. And the same night, they turned on the water, and brand new brass faucet I had on that, and they bent that to where I had to replace it.
Oh, God.
So, yeah, I said, stop bending things.
Did Robin show you the picture of the dog kennel that's got the drop hasp that goes on to the big post that holds it in place? And she was complaining that the dog kept getting out. So they caught the dog and put the dog in there, and then they crushed the hasp. So, like, you literally couldn't open it anymore. They had to replace it. It was just destroyed. It's not opening.
Like, they don't know their own strength. I mean,
no, they pinched it together. That's not how you use it. You don't drop it in place and then pinch it together. You just drop it in place.
That's the only way to keep it on, I guess. But, it's been a wild ride since and like I say, they came out to me not too long after we were still doing this study. I guess they came out to me about 2 years before the study published. And, it's just been a wild ride ever since. like I say, I love them. They're great. They're kind and thoughtful and everything, but they're good neighbors. Let's put it that way. But they do some really crazy things.
Yep, and if you're friends with them, they're some of the best friends you can have. So I'll tell you that much. It's worth being friends with them.
Not mean or bad in any way. They're amusing, actually. They've done some. One of these days, if I get brave enough, I'm going to take all my pictures and make a book out of it with what happened along with it, because it's some pretty amazing stuff, like the raw crawfish wanting to crawl in my house. That was. I know what crawfish, where their little homes are, and you can tell it, and I've never seen one on this property. Yet I've had 2 different live crawfish, one at my front door and one at my front gate. And actually, I saw another one the other day, and there are no signs that they've ever lived here. So it's been a wild ride. What can I say?
It's interesting how they import things. They decided when Kevin was down in Arkansas that his backyard was too wide open, because even though there were trees there, they had knocked down all the underbrush and they mowed it. So the light penetrated from the back porch too far into the backyard, and they couldn't effectively hide and watch him sitting out on the porch smoking a cigarette when he came out at night. So one of them decided to rectify the situation by moving a tree into place where he could hide behind the tree and then Kevin wouldn't see him. The only problem with this is that 35-foot tree suddenly appearing in the backyard was pretty freaking obvious. It still had the roots on it, and it had clay on the roots there's no clay within 5 miles of his house. So apparently they ripped this thing out of the ground and carried it quite a ways to have just the perfect shelter to hide behind when they're watching Kevin smoking his cigarettes. So yeah, they do really goofy stuff sometimes.
Yeah. That tree that they got the bark rubbed off of, it's over 100 years old, and like I say, they go up the backside of it, and they go way up in the top and sit in the fork, and I mean you can see exactly where they've been and where their hands have been, because that bark is rubbed off. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they watch, and that's what they were doing in that pecan tree they were killing, and it did finally die even after all. So the kids play on the roof and go over. I have a peach tree, and they would go pick the peaches off the top of on my roof. They'd run across, get up there and pick the peaches and sit up there and eat them and throw the pits down and the partially eaten peaches. So, it's they do a lot of things.
So make sure that you're kind to everyone. Safety first, last, and always. Pay it forward. Don't be mean to people if you don't have to be. Don't flip off the mountain giant. Don't poke Dogman with a stick. Don't punt the puck, would you? And for God's sake, whatever you do, do not hug the Wookiee.